A wealthy man wept in solitude, lamenting his lack of offspring, until two famished twins appeared at his doorstep. He was taken aback when he noticed the boys bore an uncanny resemblance to him. Before we get started, please share your location with me. Your comments never fail to brighten my day. The wind roared through the trees in the affluent enclave of Westbrook, sending autumn leaves swirling across pristine lawns. 6-year-old twins Mason and Miles Parker strolled side by side along unfamiliar streets, their hands clasped together in a bond of adventure. Their tattered garments and scuffed footwear set them apart as outsiders in this realm of opulence. Do you really believe this is the right choice? Miles murmured, his azure eyes brimming with doubt as he grasped his brother's hand more firmly. Mason nodded, his striking blue eyes mirroring a resolve that belied his youth. Mother requires assistance. She has gone without food for 3 days just so we could enjoy the last of the bread. The image of their mother, Catherine, frail and wan on her bed, turning away nourishment so they might have sustenance, fortified their determination. They observed her decline, each day revealing a frilier version of herself, her once lively visage now gaunt and marked by fever. This one, Mason concluded, pausing before the grandest mansion they had encountered, its wrought iron gates slightly ajar, unveiling a vast estate with windows shimmering amber in the twilight. Within the confines of that grand mansion, Edward Blackwood found himself solitary in his study, a glass of whiskey remaining untouched before him. At 42, he had built a wealth in real estate that many could only fantasize about, yet the void within him deepened with every year that went by. 2 years prior, he had lost Claire, his cherished wife, following countless unsuccessful efforts to start a family. The nursery upstairs stood untouched, a testament to aspirations that never came to fruition. The doorbell's chime resonated through the quiet house, jolting Edward from his reverie. Richards, the devoted butler who had served for 15 years, materialized at the study door. "Sir, there are children at the door," Edward said with a furrowed brow. "Young ones?" Intrigued, he approached the grand front entrance. As he swung the door open, the scene that greeted him rendered him utterly motionless. 2 little boys with matching faces gazed up at him, their eyes a striking blue, mirroring his own. Expansive, infused with a blend of trepidation and optimism. "Excuse me, sir," the one who stood a bit taller said, his voice quivering yet resolute. "Would you be able to share some food? Our mother is unwell, and we haven't had anything to eat since yesterday." A deep sensation welled up within Edward as he gazed at the children, a recognition so intense it left him momentarily breathless. It was more than merely their eyes. The contours of their faces, the firmness of their jaws, and the way the bolder one positioned himself just ahead to shield his siblings spoke volumes. Naturally, Edward found himself uttering, his voice sounding far away to his own ears, "Kindly step inside." As the boys entered, Richards gazed at his employer in disbelief. For 2 years, Edward Blackwood had not extended an invitation to a single person to enter his abode. Yet here he stood, welcoming 2 disheveled children as though they were anticipated visitors. Edward found it hard to articulate the attraction he felt toward these boys. Yet as he shut the door behind them, something that had long been asleep within him started to stir. The void that had always lingered by his side now appeared slightly less definitive. Every corner of Edward Blackwood's mansion showcased his immense wealth, from the intricately hand-carved mahogany staircase to the original paintings that graced the walls. As he guided the twins through the majestic entrance hall, the hollow echo of their footsteps unveiled what wealth could never procure: warmth, laughter, and vitality. "Richards, kindly request Mrs. Peterson to whip up something for our guests," Edward directed his butler, who responded with a nod, his surprise barely hidden. "At once, sir." As Richards slipped away into the kitchen, Edward led Mason and Miles into a refined sitting room. The boys sat awkwardly on the edge of a plush sofa, their tiny figures overshadowed by the luxurious piece of furniture. Mason remarked, his gaze sweeping across the room, "Your home is quite expansive, almost like a castle." Miles murmured softly. Edward offered a subtle smile. "Some days it seems overwhelmingly vast." He was taken aback by the revelation. He seldom revealed his personal emotions, even to Richards or Mrs. Peterson, who had been by his side for 15 years. The most accomplished real estate tycoon of the East Coast. Edward transformed a small inheritance into a vast empire, shaping the skylines from Boston to Miami with Blackwood Properties. Business publications hailed him as brilliant, ruthless, and visionary, yet none acknowledged his solitude. "Are you residing here alone?" Mason inquired with the straightforwardness of a child. Edward gave a slight nod. "Is it just my team and I? My spouse? She departed from this world 2 years ago. Last year we lost our grandma." Miles suggested gently. "Mom says she's keeping an eye on us from above now." Edward observed the boys with greater scrutiny. The similarity that had caught his attention at the door was even more evident now. The contours of their eyes, the tilt of their chins, and the subtle lift of Mason's left eyebrow as he articulated his thoughts. It felt akin to gazing at snapshots from his youth. "Did you say your mother is unwell?" Edward encouraged softly. Mason nodded, his demeanor shifting to one of gravity. "She dedicates herself tirelessly, yet she fell seriously ill. She struggles to rise from her bed these days. She continues to insist that she's okay, but deep down, she isn't." Miles spoke up, his soft voice heavy with concern. "She provided us with her food for 3 days." Edward experienced a sensation, a turn within him, compassion, undeniably, yet accompanied by an unusual sense of guardianship he had never felt prior. Richards made his entrance, declaring that dinner would soon be served. Edward politely took his leave and trailed behind his butler into the corridor. "Richards, there's an intriguing quality about these boys." "Caught my attention right away, sir," the butler responded softly. "The similarity is quite remarkable." From the threshold, Edward watched the twins. Miles stumbled upon a chess set resting on a side table, his attention drawn to a knight that he scrutinized with great care, while Mason lingered close by, a vigilant presence. The scene awakened a deep feeling within Edward. Remnants of a shut door above, a space once filled with promise now collecting dust. Since Claire's passing, Edward had immersed himself in his work, transforming his home into a somber sanctuary rather than a place of warmth. Every room bore haunting echoes of the future they had envisioned side by side. The nursery, with its pristine crib, the library filled with the children's books Claire had lovingly gathered, the garden where she had dreamed of their children frolicking. Their journey was marked by 3 heartbreaking miscarriages, each one plunging Claire further into the depths of her despair. Upon receiving her cancer diagnosis, it felt like a cruel twist of fate. She had battled valiantly, yet ultimately, Edward found himself solitary, surrounded only by his riches and the empty remnants of their aspirations. Mrs. Peterson emerged, a nurturing figure with gentle eyes and purposeful actions. "The evening meal is prepared, Mr. Blackwood. I've crafted a little something that the kids are likely to appreciate." In the elegant dining room, Mrs. Peterson had carefully arranged the settings at one end of the grand table instead of extending them along its daunting expanse. The twins gazed in awe at the array laid out before them. Succulent roast chicken, creamy mashed potatoes, vibrant fresh vegetables, and soft, warm rolls. "Feel free to indulge as much as you wish," Edward urged. Despite their evident hunger, the boys handled their forks and napkins with care, taking thoughtful bites instead of devouring the food recklessly. Edward noted the lessons of good manners imparted by your mother. Mason nodded with a sense of pride. "My mother always reminds me that good manners are free, and even when resources are scarce, we can still uphold them." Before we came along, she held a position in an elegant office, Miles remarked, taking measured bites. "She is well versed in the etiquette of dining," as Edward's hand hesitated in its journey to the water glass. "What was your mother's place of employment?" "Various locations," Mason shrugged. "Currently, she is employed at the grocery store, takes on house cleaning tasks, and occasionally handles phone calls during the night. However, she attended college," Miles remarked. "Her diploma proudly hangs on our wall." "What is your mother's name?" Edward inquired, his tone deliberately even. "Catherine." Parker, Mason replied. The name struck Edward with the force of a memory, reminiscent of Jennifer Catherine Parker, his former secretary, with whom he'd shared a fleeting romance 7 years prior to meeting Claire. The timelines converged seamlessly. There were 6 boys. The similarity was no accident. As the understanding settled in, Edward sensed the earth moving beneath him. These were not merely hungry children who had stumbled upon his door by coincidence. These were his offspring. The kitchen of the Blackwood mansion shone with gleaming copper and marble surfaces, exuding an air of elegance and refinement. Mason and Miles occupied the breakfast nook, a palpable tension lingering in their small shoulders, even amidst the inviting ambience crafted by Mrs. Peterson. "How about some dessert, gentlemen?" the housekeeper inquired, her hands deftly retrieving a freshly baked apple pie from the warming drawer. Miles glanced at Mason, looking for the approval of his more assertive twin. Mason nodded enthusiastically, yet he was mindful of his etiquette. "Certainly, ma'am," he responded. Edward watched from the threshold, captivated by the way the boys held onto their dignity in the face of their evident hunger. The manner in which Miles yielded to Mason, the subtle yet instinctive movement of Mason's body leaning toward his brother. These were familiar patterns that he recalled from his own childhood alongside his younger brother. "Your mother must be quite concerned about you," Edward remarked, taking a seat at the table as Mrs. Peterson dished out ample portions of pie adorned with a scoop of vanilla ice cream. "We left a note," Mason elaborated, his gaze locked on the steam curling up from his pie. "We mentioned that we were seeking assistance. She has been incredibly unwell," Miles remarked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yesterday, she was unable to rise to prepare us breakfast. She continues to insist that it will be fine tomorrow," Mason persisted, "yet she claims that every day, and her condition continues to deteriorate." Mrs. Peterson cast a concerned look at Edward, a mother facing a serious illness, tasked with the care of her 2 young sons. The circumstances were grave. "What occurred with your apartment?" Edward inquired softly. "Did you feel a sense of loss when your mother was unable to work?" The twins shared a look, an unspoken understanding flowing between them. Mason explained that we still possess it, but the heat was turned off last week. "Mother enveloped us in every blanket available. And there's no more food," Miles remarked. "The neighbor lady delivered some soup 2 days ago, but it's all gone now." Edward sensed a tightness coiling within him. It is unjust for children to carry such heavy loads. "Once you've completed your meal, would you be interested in taking some food back for your mother?" He extended an offer. Hope illuminated their faces. "Is it truly possible?" Miles inquired, his blue eyes wide with curiosity. Mrs. Peterson was in the process of collecting containers. She confidently promised to pack enough for several days. As the boys completed their dessert, Edward probed them deeper, piecing together fragments of a puzzle he was just starting to grasp. "Is your complete name Parker?" he inquired nonchalantly. "Catherine Parker?" "Indeed, sir," Mason responded. "Catherine Jennifer Parker is her full name, yet everyone simply refers to her as Catherine." "Jennifer." Edward's doubts crystallized into unwavering conviction. Jennifer. Catherine Parker was her complete name. At work, she was known as Jennifer. The timing was impeccably synchronized with their fleeting connection from 7 years prior, right before he encountered Claire. "Are you aware of your father's name?" The inquiry escaped Edward's lips before he had the chance to restrain himself. Silence enveloped the kitchen. Miles gazed at his vacant plate. Mason finally revealed that his mom has a picture of him. However, she rarely mentions him. He simply had no time for a family. The blade of remorse plunged further in. Had Jennifer attempted to convey her message to him? Could she have thought he would turn his back on his own children? Mason slid off his chair and said, "We should return to Mom. She'll be concerned if we take too much time." Mrs. Peterson had gathered a sizable basket brimming with various containers of food, including fruit, bread, and cookies. "This should help for a while," she said with a gentle smile. Edward acted with remarkable speed in his decision-making. "I would be happy to take you home. The shadows are lengthening, and that basket is bound to feel weighty." As he guided the boys toward his car, Edward's thoughts swirled with intensity. These children, his sons, had been enduring hardship while he resided in hollow opulence. 7 years of being a father gone. 7 years he could never retrieve. Regardless of what transpired between him and Jennifer previously, one fact remained undeniable. All that Edward Blackwood had meticulously arranged in his life was on the brink of transformation for eternity. Rest slipped away from Edward that night. His expansive bedroom, featuring a tailored king-sized mattress and luxurious Egyptian cotton sheets, provided no solace as memories and questions swirled relentlessly in his thoughts. At 3 a.m., he cast aside any notion of sleep and ventured into his home office. The expansive mahogany desk was adorned with carefully organized records, chronicling every facet of his existence, from the intimate to the professional. He opened a filing cabinet that held employee records from years gone by. Parker, Jennifer K. He whispered, his fingers expertly locating the folder. Productivity. The file held the usual employment paperwork, performance reviews that were all outstanding, and a small envelope he had never dared to open, her resignation letter. He had been too wounded by her abrupt exit to read it then, convinced they shared a bond that transcended the professional realm. Within lay a solitary sheet of paper. Edward, I am stepping down effective immediately due to personal reasons. I am grateful for the chance to be part of Blackwood Properties. Jennifer Parker, without a word, without a trace, no hint of a pregnancy. Edward shut his eyes, lost in thought. Their fleeting connection was marked by passion yet shrouded in secrecy. The company's policy was clear in its disapproval of such entanglements. It was at a charity gala that he encountered Claire, and the spark between them was immediate. He had concluded his relationship with Jennifer in the most considerate manner he could muster. 2 weeks later, she had stepped down. Did she already have an inkling that she was expecting? Had she attempted to convey her thoughts to him? He powered on his laptop and began browsing social media for Catherine Jennifer Parker. No recent updates were found. He then sifted through public records, uncovering an address nestled in the most impoverished area of Westbrook, a striking juxtaposition to his well-off community just a few miles distant. The deeper Edward delved, the heavier his guilt became. Employment records indicated that Jennifer, who is now known as Catherine, was employed, juggling several minimum wage positions at once. No certificate of marriage. Without a partner to assist with the kids. His sons endured hardship while he generously contributed millions to various charitable endeavors. The first light of dawn crept in as a gentle knock broke the silence of his contemplation. Richard stood at the door, impeccably dressed, even at this early hour. Gentlemen, the lads have made their way back. Edward rushed down the stairs to discover Mason and Miles waiting in the foyer, their breaths forming delicate puffs in the crisp morning chill. Mason reported with a serious expression that Mom had some soup and toast. She mentioned that we shouldn't disturb anyone, yet we felt compelled to express our gratitude for the meal. Edward lowered himself to meet their gaze. You're not causing me any inconvenience whatsoever. It's great to hear that your mother had something to eat. Is she doing any better? The twins shared a knowing look. Miles expressed his concern, saying, She's still coughing a lot. Her forehead feels quite warm. Edward acted quickly and decisively. I have a friend who practices medicine. Would you permit him to visit your mother? Could you do this for me as a kindness? The twins paused, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Mason spoke softly. We can't afford doctors. My mother believes that hospitals inquire excessively. There's no charge for this, Edward confidently promised them. Rest assured, there will be no inquiries, I assure you. Simply a companion to bring comfort to your mother. After an hour had passed, Dr. Harris, who had cared for Claire during her sickness, was now assessing Catherine in her modest apartment, while Edward remained with the twins in their cramped living room. The area was tidy yet minimalistic. A tattered sofa, a modest television, a bookshelf brimming with borrowed books. A diploma from State University adorned the wall next to cherished school photos of the boys. Dr. Harris stepped out of the bedroom, his expression somber and serious, intense. Pneumonia, he murmured softly to Edward. She requires immediate hospitalization. Her oxygen levels have reached a critical low. Edward surveyed the anxious expressions of his sons and resolved to make yet another pivotal choice. He instructed Dr. Harris to make the arrangements. The perfect private room, equipped with all her essentials. I will take care of all costs. As the ambulance arrived, Edward observed the twins collecting their mother's belongings. A cozy robe, soft slippers, and a trusty hairbrush. The way these small children navigated the crisis revealed much about the hardships they had already encountered in their young lives. He promised that no matter the challenges that awaited them, Mason and Miles would never again endure such struggles in solitude. Victor Reynolds's Bentley came to a sudden stop in the circular driveway of the Blackwood estate, gravel flying in all directions. At 62, with silver hair and a sharp intellect, Victor had served as Edward's attorney and trusted advisor for more than 2 decades. The individual who had steered Blackwood Properties through its boldest expansions and most complicated legal battles. Today, he burst into the mansion without warning, his briefcase held tightly in a tense grip. Where could he be? Victor insisted to Richards. Mr. Blackwood awaits you on the terrace, sir. The butler responded with an air of composed detachment. Should I make your introduction? Refrain. Annoyance. Victor growled, moving through the house with a commanding presence. He discovered Edward perched on the stone terrace, observing 2 young boys engaged in a spontaneous game of tag around the garden fountain. For a brief instant, Victor remained unseen, taking in the unfolding scene with an increasing sense of dread. Edward Blackwood, the formidable real estate tycoon who had withdrawn from the world for the past 2 years, watched with a subtle smile as children dashed across his pristine lawn. Have you truly lost your senses? Victor's voice pierced the tranquility of the moment. Edward faced the situation with a calm demeanor. I was curious when you would finally arrive. Richards reached out to my office in a state of distress. Victor whispered, ensuring his voice was soft enough that the children remained oblivious. There's something intriguing about you taking in street urchins and hurrying a woman to the hospital. The tabloids are already lurking about. Edward maintained his composure. They aren't just street kids, Victor. They belong to my son. Victor's face turned a deep shade of crimson. He paused, casting a glance at the boys before seizing Edward's arm. Currently indoors. In Edward's study, Victor moved restlessly, akin to a trapped beast. This reeks of deceit. A woman asserts that her children are yours, and you simply take her word for it. Without a DNA test or legal advice, you, of all individuals. Edward clarified that Catherine hasn't made any claims. She remains oblivious to my suspicions about the truth. And observe them, Victor. You've been a part of my life since my early days. Are you truly able to claim that you don't notice it? Victor gestured with a flick of his hand, brushing it aside. Young minds can be nurtured. Cosmetics have the power to forge similarities. Are you aware of the number of long-lost children who have sought to claim portions of fortune similar to yours? The boys arrived at my door, their hunger evident. They did not request any funds. However, Victor lost his composure. This is the beginning of these schemes. First comes the emotional appeal, then the unveiling, followed by the requests, and you've jumped right to making them a part of your living space. Edward's jaw clenched. Their mother is gravely unwell, battling pneumonia. What would you like me to do? Are we considering placing them in foster care? Victor leaned in closer, his voice lowering to a secretive murmur. Consider the perception others have of you and the value of the company's shares. What unfolds when the media uncovers that the most sought-after bachelor in Westbrook has fathered illegitimate twins with a former secretary? Every opportunist from here to California will step forward with comparable assertions. A shadow of uncertainty crossed Edward's features. Victor seized the opportunity. If she truly is the person you believe her to be, why didn't she reveal that to you 7 years ago? Why remain in hardship when she could have obtained financial support from a wealthy individual? It simply doesn't make sense, Edward. At Westbrook Memorial Hospital, Catherine Parker floated between awareness and oblivion, the antibiotics and oxygen gradually aiding her lungs in their battle against the infection. In a fleeting moment of insight, she inquired of the nurse about the whereabouts of her sons. The nurse reassured her, saying, "They're safe, dear. A gentleman by the name of Mr. Blackwood has been tending to their needs during your recovery." Catherine's fever-bright eyes grew wide with alarm. Blackwood? Edward Blackwood? As the nurse gave a reassuring nod, Catherine attempted to rise, only to be met with a sudden and intense coughing fit. "You don't understand," she gasped, struggling to catch her breath between coughs. "He will not take my boys. He had no desire for them before, and he still doesn't receive them now." The nurse softly positioned her back against the pillows. "Conserve your energy, Miss Parker. No matter what it is, you'll find a way to resolve it once you're feeling better." Catherine averted her gaze to the wall, tears cascading quietly down her heated cheeks. For 6 years, she had shielded her sons from the man who had prioritized his career over his own children. She had never revealed that their father was aware of their existence and had opted to send money instead of affection. She had never revealed how she had turned down his frigid financial proposal, resolute in her commitment to raise her sons with honor instead of relying on handouts. Now, through some cruel twist of fate, Mason and Miles found themselves in Edward Blackwood's mansion, surrounded by the wealth and privilege that could have been theirs all along, while she remained helpless, unable to protect them from the looming disappointment when he grew weary of his paternal role. In the face of Victor's cautions, Edward found it impossible to part with the twins as their mother healed. The mansion, once cavernous and empty for years, slowly began to resonate with the sounds of small footsteps and the occasional burst of laughter. Mrs. Peterson noted the transformations with a sense of serene contentment. For the first time since Claire's passing, illumination flickered in spaces that had long been shrouded in shadow, and meals were shared amidst the warmth of dialogue instead of the weight of silence. On the third morning, Edward discovered Miles seated cross-legged on the library floor, encircled by volumes on stars and planets. "Are you interested in astronomy?" Edward inquired, taking a seat next to him. Miles gave a timid nod. "My aspiration is to become an astronaut one day, or perhaps a scientist delving into the mysteries of black holes." "When I was your age, I also dreamed of becoming an astronaut," Edward confessed. "My ceiling was adorned with glow-in-the-dark stars, creating a celestial wonderland above me." Miles gazed upward, curiosity igniting within him. "Is that so? Mom wouldn't allow us to decorate our ceiling with stars, fearing it would upset the landlord." Without a moment's hesitation, Edward extended his hand towards a substantial astronomy atlas perched on a high shelf. "This book held a special place in my heart during my childhood. It reveals every constellation in the night sky." Miles squinted to catch a glimpse of the intricate illustrations, and Edward, with a natural instinct, hoisted the child onto his shoulders. The seemingly ordinary gesture, a routine shared between fathers and sons, carried a weight of significance. For a fleeting moment, the burden of the tiny form resting on his shoulders caused a swell of emotion to constrict Edward's chest. "I can see everything from up here," Miles declared, his tiny hands balancing on Edward's head. In the meantime, Mason stumbled upon the chess set nestled in the study. Edward discovered him meticulously arranging the pieces, his face contorted in deep concentration. "Are you a player?" Edward inquired. "No, sir," Mason responded. "However, I have observed individuals engaging in play at the park. The horse pieces truly captivate me." "They're known as knights," Edward elaborated, seated opposite him. "Are you interested in gaining knowledge?" Mason's expression brightened. "Would you be able to guide me? I excel at picking up new games quickly." As Edward outlined the fundamental moves, he was impressed by Mason's swift understanding of the concepts. By the time of their third game, the boy was contemplating 2 moves in advance, his tactical thinking echoing Edward's own reflections. "As a child, you have an innate talent," Edward commended as Mason skillfully seized a bishop. The boy radiated joy and confidence. "My mother often points out that I can be a bit too driven in competitions at times. Miles enjoys allowing me to win, though I can sense it. In those seemingly mundane instances, like sharing a book with Miles or engaging in a game of chess with Mason. A subtle mending began within Edward, addressing a fracture he had been unaware of. After years of solitude and sorrow, he began to look forward to the sound of their voices, their inquiries, their revelations. Every evening, Edward awaited the latest news from Dr. Harris regarding Catherine's condition. The doctor noted that she is making progress, albeit at a gradual pace. The infection was notably intense. She will require some time to regain her strength. One evening, while Mrs. Peterson was assisting the twins in getting ready for bed in the guest room, Mason posed the question that Edward had been anxiously anticipating. "Mr. Blackwood, what motivates you to assist us so generously?" Edward hesitated, unsure of how to respond without disclosing his doubts regarding their lineage. "Because everyone requires assistance at times," he finally remarked, "and you lads remind me of what truly matters in the evening." Edward lingered in his study, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him, as he pondered the photograph of Jennifer Catherine from her employment file. He had lost 6 years of his son's life, 6 birthdays, 6 Christmases, first words, first steps, moments that were forever beyond his reach. Regardless of the errors that had transpired or the miscommunications that had arisen, Edward quietly promised to rectify the situation, not only for the boys but also for their mother. Edward walked toward the shut door at the end of the hallway, a door that had remained untouched for 2 years. His hand quivered ever so slightly on the brass doorknob. Behind this door was the nursery he and Claire had envisioned with such optimism, a space brimming with aspirations that never came to fruition. In his moment of uncertainty, a faint voice emerged from the shadows behind him. "Does this room hold a unique significance?" Mason inquired, his inquisitive gaze locked onto Edward's hand. Edward inhaled deeply. "Indeed, this space was intended to be a child's room. My wife and I envisioned it that way. We had plans for a baby, but those dreams never came to fruition." Mason nodded with unexpected insight. "How unfortunate. Mom has a collection of baby items stored away in her closet as well." At times, tears well up in her eyes as she gazes at it. With a steadying breath, Edward inserted the key and gently nudged the door ajar. Sunlight poured through the blue curtains, casting a warm glow on the immaculate white crib, the gently swaying rocking chair, and the shelves lined with untouched toys and books. A delicate veil of dust settled over everything, in spite of Mrs. Peterson's diligent efforts to maintain the rest of the house. "Wow," Mason exhaled in awe. "It resembles a wonderland of playthings." Rather than the anguish Edward had anticipated, he experienced an unexpected sense of solace upon witnessing a child, his child, in this realm that had lingered in a state of suspension for an eternity. "Would you and Miles be interested in staying here while your mother recovers?" He discovered he was inquiring. "The guest room is pleasant, yet this space was intended for kids." Mason's eyes grew wide. "Is it truly possible?" There are actually 2 beds. There were, without a doubt, 2 petite beds positioned along one wall. Claire had been adamant about getting ready for the chance of twins, a notion that had felt somewhat fanciful back then, while Edward assisted Mason and Mrs. Peterson in transferring the twins' sparse possessions into the nursery. He spotted an intriguing box perched on a high shelf in the closet. Richards clarified that certain items from the renovated offices had been placed there for temporary storage. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the dining room where the boys shared a meal with Mrs. Peterson, Edward's curiosity led him to scrutinize the box. Amidst the office supplies and neglected personal belongings lay a sealed envelope, its familiar handwriting unmistakably belonging to Jennifer Parker. With his heart racing, Edward carefully opened the envelope. The letter within was dated 7 years prior, mere days after he had concluded their relationship. "Edward, I've made attempts to connect with you face to face, but your availability has been quite challenging, and now it all makes sense. I came across the society page photos featuring you alongside Claire Westingham at the charity gala. I have something important to share. I'm expecting a baby. 2 months. I had intended to end the pregnancy, but I find myself unable to proceed with that decision. I will be taking on the responsibility of raising this child independently and will not seek any assistance from you. I am hereby resigning from Blackwood Properties, effective immediately. I would appreciate it if you could refrain from reaching out to me. I can see the joy in your eyes when you're with Claire, and I have no intention of making things more complicated for you. Should you ever desire to understand your child, that opportunity will always be available to you. Jennifer Edwards settled into the rocking chair, the letter quivering in her grasp. She had made an effort to convey her thoughts to him. The correspondence had never found its way to him. 7 years apart? What about his sons maturing in his absence? Is Catherine facing her struggles in solitude? Everything unraveled due to the misfiling of this letter. A dreadful thought began to take shape in his mind. He activated the intercom for Richards. "Excuse me, sir?" The voice of the butler replied. "Who managed my personal correspondence 7 years ago when Miss Parker was employed here? Richards?" A moment of silence lingered. "Mr. Reynolds managed all delicate communications, sir. He claimed it was to shield you from interruptions." Victor, the realization struck Edward with overwhelming intensity. His loyal companion and legal advisor had intercepted Jennifer's correspondence, intentionally shielding him from the truth about his children. At Westbrook Memorial Hospital, Catherine Parker found herself facing an unexpected visitor. Victor Reynolds stepped into her private room, holding a leather portfolio and wearing a practiced smile that failed to illuminate his eyes. "Miss Parker," he remarked with a polished demeanor, "there are important topics we need to address." Following a fortnight of rigorous treatment, Catherine Parker had regained enough strength to be released from the hospital. Although she remained frail, the most severe effects of the pneumonia had subsided, resulting in a lingering cough and a significant lack of energy. Edward lingered uncomfortably in the hospital corridor while Dr. Harris went over the discharge instructions with Catherine. The initial moment he encountered her awareness was fleeting and charged, her gaze expanding in realization, only to constrict with an icy demeanor that conveyed much more than words ever could. "Mother!" The twins dashed into the room, hurrying to Catherine's bedside. Excitement radiated from their faces as they embraced her gently, taking care to avoid the spot where the 4 had just been taken out. "My brave boys," Catherine whispered, her voice husky as she drew them near. Her eyes shimmered with emotion as she inhaled their familiar fragrance, observing fresh attire, meticulously styled hair, and a vibrant radiance that hinted at nourishing meals and attentive care. Edward stood at the threshold, clearing his throat. "I would be pleased to extend my home to you during your recovery, Miss Parker. The physician indicates that you will require several additional weeks of rest to achieve complete recovery." Catherine's gaze locked onto his, a tempest of feelings swirling across her features. Suspicion, bitterness, and underlying it all, fatigue. She started, "That's not needed." "Please, Mom," Miles interrupted. "Mr. Blackwood boasts a garden adorned with a fountain and a library filled to the brim with every astronomy book one could dream of. Moreover, Mason remarked that Mrs. Peterson bakes the most delightful cookies. There, you can find strength." Catherine's determination faltered as she caught a glimpse of the hope shining in her son's eyes. For years, she had poured her heart and soul into her work, striving tirelessly to provide them with even the essentials. Now they had known a solace she could never offer, and the realization pierced her heart. "Only until you're completely healed," Edward said softly, considering the boys. Catherine, with a hint of hesitation, finally consented. The journey to the Blackwood estate unfolded in silence, with an oppressive tension lingering in the atmosphere. The twins babbled with enthusiasm, unaware of the tensions simmering among the grown-ups. Mrs. Peterson had arranged a suite close to the nursery where the boys were residing. As Catherine settled into the opulent bedroom, a sense of being an outsider washed over her, as if she were trespassing in a realm that had been kept from her sons until this moment. In the initial days, she confined herself to her room, venturing out solely for meals at the insistence of the boys. Edward held her in high regard, choosing to keep his distance whenever she was around. One evening, a week after her arrival, Catherine made her way to the library once the twins had drifted off to sleep. She discovered Edward nestled by the fireplace, engrossed in his book. Without any introduction, she remarked, They possess your mannerisms. Edward glanced upward, taken aback by her arrival and the weight of her words. Catherine observed for years, drawing her robe closer around her slender figure. Miles taps his fingers in that familiar way, a telltale sign of his contemplation. Mason angles his head in that familiar way whenever he's deep in thought. Edward placed his book down gently. They are truly exceptional young men. Catherine, you have truly excelled in raising them. How did you know? She asked, her voice strained. When did you come to that realization? As soon as they appeared at my doorstep, Edward responded with complete honesty. The similarity is undeniable. Catherine's poise faltered just a bit. So what's the reason? What was the reason for pretending for 7 years that they were not there? Why leave me to face this challenge by myself when you had everything? Is this? Her gesture swept across the lavish room, the grand mansion, the privilege that had forever eluded her grasp. Edward's expression reflected true bewilderment. I was completely unaware of them, Catherine. It wasn't until they arrived at my doorstep. She gazed at him, her face a canvas of disbelief. 7 years ago, Victor Reynolds approached me with a check and a confidentiality agreement in hand. He mentioned that you weren't keen on fatherhood and preferred to keep things private. The revelation struck Edward with the force of a tangible impact. Another fragment of Victor's treachery clicked into position. On Sunday morning, an uneasy stillness enveloped the Blackwood mansion. In the library, Edward walked back and forth, anticipation building as he awaited Victor's arrival, the intercepted letter firmly held in his grasp. As the attorney made his entrance, his usual poise wavered upon encountering the look on Edward's face. You deceived me, Edward murmured softly. His voice carried a perilous edge, more threatening than any shout could convey. For 7 years, you denied me the chance to be with my sons. Victor adjusted his tie with precision. I took the steps needed to safeguard both you and Blackwood Properties. The timing couldn't have been worse. You had only just crossed paths with Claire. The Watson merger was precariously poised. So you caught on. Jennifer's correspondence. Edward forcefully placed the paper on his desk. What happens next? You approached her with a bribe for silence? Did you represent yourself as acting on my behalf? She was merely your assistant, Edward. Victor scoffed. An unremarkable individual from the typing pool. What were your expectations of me? Allow her to disrupt all that you've created? You found yourself deeply in love with Claire, on the brink of joining one of the most powerful families in the state through marriage. Edward's voice sank to an even softer whisper. The absence of a father in those boys' lives stems from the choices you made. Their mother juggled 3 jobs. They departed, famished, while I resided here in hollow opulence. Victor maintained that he had made the right decision. If you had been aware of the pregnancy, you would have discarded everything due to a sense of unwarranted guilt. Your future has been safeguarded. You took it, Edward retorted. Leave my home, Victor. Your services are no longer required. And if you approach my family once more, how is your family doing? Victor chuckled in disbelief. A week ago, they were mere strangers to you, and now they've become your family? Unbeknownst to either man, Catherine lingered in the doorway, having caught every word of their conversation. She withdrew quietly, her universe shifting dramatically. For 7 years, she had harbored her resentment, convinced that Edward had turned his back on his own offspring. She toiled tirelessly, pushing herself to the brink instead of relying on his finances, resolute that her sons would always feel cherished. In the afternoon light, Edward discovered Catherine amidst the blooms of the garden. Her eyes glistened with the remnants of tears. I heard, she said simply, about your conversation with Victor. Edward took a seat next to her on the weathered stone bench. I was completely unaware of the boys, Catherine. I could never bring myself to forsake my own children. I kept your picture, she confessed, retrieving a faded photograph from her pocket. The boys possessed but a single image of their father. She passed it to Edward, who was 7 years her junior, during a company picnic, beaming at the camera. I mentioned that you had too much on your plate for a family, she went on. I never claimed you were a bad person. I couldn't stand the thought of them feeling abandoned. Edward's sight became clouded with tears. Catherine nodded, her own tears streaming down her face as she lamented the countless moments she had missed. Everyone has experienced this. The delicate tranquility that had begun to take root in the Blackwood mansion was abruptly disrupted 3 days later with the arrival of the morning papers. Edward's coffee cup halted midway to his lips as he gazed at the front page headline. Blackwood's secret family, millionaire's love child twins discovered. Under the headline, there were images of Mason and Miles enjoying the garden, paired with a youthful picture of Edward and a blurry snapshot of Catherine exiting the hospital. The piece explored Catherine's modest beginnings as Edward's ex-secretary, raised questions about paternity allegations, and included insights from a confidential source connected to the family. Richards materialized beside Edward. "Sir, there are photographers waiting at the gates." Catherine stepped into the dining room, her complexion ashen. The school reached out. Journalists are gathered outside the building. The boys are filled with fear. Edward had his hand outstretched toward his phone. "I will dispatch security to escort them back. This situation is coming to a close." Yet, the destruction was proliferating. By afternoon, Edward's phone buzzed incessantly with calls from board members, investors, and social connections, each seeking answers. Catherine, still frail from her recent illness, withdrew to her chamber, burdened by a fever. The pressure had worn me down. That evening, as Mrs. Peterson tended to the twins, Edward settled beside Catherine's bed, gently placing a cool compress on her forehead. Apologies slipped from his lips in a hushed tone. "Victor is the one responsible for this. He's exacting retribution for my decision to let him go." That individual. Catherine's eyes slowly opened, revealing a world anew. The boys find themselves in a state of confusion. They seem puzzled by the attention, wondering why individuals are snapping photos and inquiring if you are their dad. Edward's hand came to a halt. "We have yet to share that information with them," Catherine murmured. "We must, before another takes action." In the stillness that ensued, Edward observed how the evening light gently caressed Catherine's features, unveiling echoes of the young woman he had encountered fleetingly 7 years prior. "You know this won't last," she said suddenly, her voice laced with a sense of nostalgia, anguish. "The excitement will fade away. You'll grow weary of nurturing kids who don't belong in your reality." Edward held her gaze with unwavering intensity. "They are an integral part of my being, Catherine. Arguably the most enjoyable aspect. That will remain unchanged." She averted her gaze, tears on the brink of spilling. "They resemble you, yet they carry a piece of me as well. Grown up in the care of a secretary, rather than among the elite. Once the uproar subsides, the intricacies and the shame it brings to your enterprise will become evident." "No," Edward interjected, grasping her hand. "All I see are my sons. They are flawless precisely in their current state." The DNA testing facility stood as a pristine, contemporary structure crafted from glass and steel. Edward had selected it with great care, a renowned medical laboratory known for its flawless confidentiality measures. Despite his unwavering certainty regarding the twins' parentage, the escalating media storm rendered legal verification essential. "This will require just a moment." "Just a moment," the technician said softly, as she readied to swab the inside of Mason's cheek. "Rest assured, there will be no needles involved." Mason perched resolutely on the examination chair, as Miles observed with wide-eyed anticipation, gripping Catherine's hand tightly. Once the straightforward procedure was finished for all three, the technician beamed with satisfaction. "Results will be available in just 48 hours. As Edward drove home, he observed that the boys in the back seat were strikingly silent. "Is everything all right?" he inquired, locking eyes with them through the rearview mirror. Mason, ever the articulate one, finally expressed their concern. "What occurs if the test indicates that we aren't connected?" Edward was taken aback by the question. He reassured them that the test would validate what they already understood. "Yet, regardless of the outcome, my feelings for you both remain unchanged." 2 days later, Edward found an email in his inbox containing the attached results. He printed the document and examined it in solitude within his study, even though the conclusion mirrored his expectations precisely. 99.999% probability of paternity for both boys. That evening, he assembled Catherine and the twins in the library. The formal atmosphere imbued the occasion with a sense of profound importance. "I have something important to share with you," Edward began, his voice soft yet earnest. He presented the papers to Catherine first, who responded with a silent nod, her eyes shimmering with emotion. He then lowered himself to the ground before the twins. "Are you familiar with the concept of DNA?" Miles nodded with enthusiasm. "The essence of our being lies within the intricate code woven into our cells." Our exploration of the topic took place during science class. Indeed, a smile spread across Edward's face. "These documents reflect the sentiments we've all experienced since our first encounter. I am your biological parent." The twins gazed at him, absorbing this affirmation of a suspicion that had started to take root in their minds. "Is that the reason our eyes mirror each other?" Mason inquired. Edward gave a slight nod, and the identical chin along with the same approach to tackling challenges. "Does this imply we can refer to you as Dad?" Miles inquired with a touch of uncertainty, the question lingering in the atmosphere, heavy with significance and anticipation. Edward felt a lump form in his throat, overwhelmed by emotion. "I would be truly grateful if you could." That night, after the boys were tucked into bed, Edward lingered in the hallway, feeling the weight of the day's events pressing down on him. From behind the slightly ajar door, he caught Miles's soft whisper, "Good night, Dad," as he tried the word out in the shadows. Mason mirrored his brother, the uncomplicated word laden with 6 years of absence, contemplation, and yearning. Edward withdrew to his study, where he finally permitted himself to shed tears for the years lost for Claire, who would never know these remarkable boys, for Catherine, who had borne the weight alone, and for his sons, who had grown up without his presence. Yet, he primarily shed tears of thankfulness for the unforeseen blessing of fatherhood that had come to him on a chilly night, when he believed the finest opportunities of his life were already past. When Richards discovered him hours later, gazing into the abyss, with tears marking his cheeks, the butler gently rested a hand on his employer's shoulder, a rare moment of intimacy breaking the usual formality. "Well done, Sir," Richards remarked gently. "These individuals are truly exceptional young men." Victor Reynolds lounged in his penthouse office, cradling a glass of scotch while gazing out at the sprawling city beneath him. The sting of rejection from Edward Blackwood, after years of unwavering dedication, seared through him like corrosive acid. 30 years dedicated to safeguarding Edward from his own impulses, to nurturing the success of Blackwood Properties, all erased by the sudden emergence of 2 children. His phone rang, a journalist eager for a story. "Regarding the Blackwood scandal, I find myself worried about my old friend," Victor remarked with a calm demeanor. "Since the passing of his wife, he has not seemed like his usual self. The board is understandably concerned about these hasty choices concerning children he has never encountered." The groundwork for his retribution was firmly established. Uncertainty surrounding Edward's mental condition, inquiries into Catherine's intentions, and apprehensions from shareholders. Tomorrow he would take it to the next level. Within the grand confines of the Blackwood mansion, Edward meticulously examined documents alongside his legal team. Reports regarding his hidden family led to a 3-point decline in Blackwood Properties stock. Shareholders sought clarity on the situation. The head lawyer explained that Mr. B. Reynolds has submitted a request for an emergency injunction. He asserts that he speaks for worried shareholders who are challenging your ability to manage the company, citing his own psychological distress stemming from extended grief. Edward's jaw clenched. Is he really using Claire's death as a weapon against me? There is additional information. The attorney proceeded with caution. He is seeking a court order to halt the legal recognition of the twins until a comprehensive psychological assessment has been conducted. Affidavits have been collected from former employees asserting that you had knowledge of Ms. Parker's pregnancy 7 years prior. That's a falsehood, Edward snarled. We understand, sir, but addressing this in a public forum could lead to complications. Mr. Reynolds proposes a settlement. You take a brief hiatus from daily operations, delay any formal acknowledgement of the children, and the shareholders will ease their worries. Edward rose suddenly. I refuse to use my sons as leverage. Prepare any necessary counter-filings. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere in the house grew thick with tension. Catherine caught snippets of the legal discussions, and concern etched itself on her face as she assisted the twins with their homework at the kitchen table. Will this create challenges for your business? She inquired softly as the boys made their way upstairs. Edward confessed that Victor is attempting to manipulate him, leveraging the company and invoking Claire's memory. Catherine declared bluntly, "It's because of us. We've introduced a whirlwind into your existence." Absolutely not, Edward maintained. It was Victor's betrayal that caused this, not you or the boys. Upstairs, Mason and Miles were wide awake, contrary to what their parents thought. They nestled in the window seat of their room, exchanging soft whispers. Mason said with concern, "They're fighting because of us. Did you catch what that attorney mentioned? They could take away Dad's company, and they're saying hurtful things about Mom in the news," Miles added. At school, Jenna shared a story with me on her phone. It was mentioned that Mom was attempting to obtain Dad's money. The twins grew quiet, listening to the raised voices from downstairs. Unfamiliar lawyers engaged in a strategic discussion, deliberating over the boys' future as though they were mere assets to be allocated. Mason concluded, his youthful visage marked by resolve, that we were merely creating complications. Do you recall the advice Mom often shares? Parkers are here to find solutions, not create issues. Miles acknowledged with a serious expression. What actions should we take? An hour later, Edward rapped gently on the boys' door to bid them good night, only to discover the room was vacant. A note rested on the pillow, penned in Mason's meticulous handwriting. We aim to avoid being an inconvenience to anyone. Rest assured we are fine. We returned home. They couldn't have gone far, Edward remarked, fighting to suppress the rising panic in his voice, while he searched the boys' room for any signs or hints. The paper twisted tightly in his grip. They lack the funds for public transport or a cab. Catherine was in the process of donning her coat. They've returned to our apartment. They understand the path. They've strolled through these neighborhoods for as long as they can remember. The urgent quest commenced as Edward's driver sped them towards Catherine's apartment building. The dimly lit space felt desolate, with dust accumulating on the sparse remnants of furniture. Where could they possibly venture next? Edward inquired, a sense of urgency clear in his tone. Catherine's eyes grew large with a sudden understanding. The graveyard. My mother rests there. The boys go to her resting place whenever they feel down. What ensued was a relentless pursuit that lasted 3 days. Reports from law enforcement submitted, security personnel combing through the city, Edward's image of the twins showcased on regional news broadcasts. Catherine hardly found rest, her well-being deteriorating once more under the weight of stress. Edward set aside all professional commitments, dedicating himself solely to the search for his sons. On the third morning, as fatigue and dread loomed over them, the doorbell of the mansion chimed. Richards opened the door to discover a small woman in her 30s, possessing gentle eyes and a resolute demeanor. Next to her were Mason and Miles, weary yet unscathed. Elizabeth. Catherine hurried ahead, enveloping the twins in her embrace. Elizabeth explained that she discovered them at your mother's grave. I only just came across the news reports, even though they've been staying with me. Elizabeth Andrews had served as Jennifer's assistant for many years. She stood by Catherine's side and continued to be her friend during the challenging times that came after. As they took their places in the library, Edward felt the weight of Elizabeth's gaze, scrutinizing him with a thoughtful intensity. There's an additional detail you ought to be aware of, she remarked at last, reaching into her handbag to produce a sealed envelope. For 7 years, I've held on to these, anticipating that they might prove useful one day. Contained within were emails exchanged between Victor and the HR department concerning Jennifer's resignation. A copy of the initial letter Jennifer had sent to Edward regarding her pregnancy, and most incriminating, a recording of Victor urging Jennifer to accept a settlement and leave town. Elizabeth explained that he threatened to concoct misconduct charges against you if Jennifer didn't vanish. That day, as I was busy copying files, I caught wind of everything happening around me. Jennifer declined his offer but consented to depart in order to safeguard your reputation. Catherine and Edward shared a moment of disbelief, their eyes widening as the realization of Victor's cunning became clear. They grasped the depth of his scheming, recognizing how meticulously he had engineered their divide and the years of heartache that ensued. The twins, weary from their trials, had drifted off to sleep resting against Catherine's shoulders. Gazing at their serene expressions, Edward and Catherine experienced a moment of complete harmony, an unspoken promise that their family would remain unbroken forever. The information presented by Elizabeth transformed the entire situation. Edward's legal team acted promptly, submitting counter-allegations against Victor Reynolds for fraud, obstruction, and corporate misconduct. The audio of Victor coercing Jennifer to vacate the area was especially incriminating, his tone unmistakably menacing as he issued threats. The board must see this immediately, as Edward's lead attorney advised, in order to fabricate misconduct accusations against him if she doesn't disappear. Reynolds' whole argument relies on portraying you as unpredictable and Ms. Parker as someone looking to take advantage. This demonstrates the contrary. In just a matter of days, the intricate story that Victor had woven began to fall apart. The emergency board meeting he convened to challenge Edward's leadership ultimately led to his own downfall. As proof of his prolonged deceit emerged, longtime allies began to pull away. The lawsuit from the shareholders has been retracted, accompanied by formal apologies. In the meantime, the media that had enthusiastically circulated sensational rumors began to explore a new perspective. A touching reunion unfolds as a father meets the sons he never knew were out there, tragically torn apart by the deceitful machinations of a cunning attorney. The mood of the public changed almost instantly. "They're dubbing it the story of the year," Catherine said, pointing out the newspaper headline to Edward. "The Blackwood family has come together once more. Honesty prevails against falsehood." The swift changes brought a mix of thrill and bewilderment for the twins. One morning, Mason discovered Edward in his study, meticulously examining legal documents. "What will become of us now?" he inquired, his youthful expression earnest. "When will this come to an end?" Edward placed the papers down gently. "What are you trying to say, my boy?" Mason nervously toyed with the cuff of his sweater. "At school, Tommy mentioned that you might grow weary of the dad role and decide to return us to our previous apartment." Edward crouched down to connect with his son at eye level. "Mason, I'm not engaging in any games. I am your father, and it's not merely a matter of biology. My love for you and Miles surpasses everything else in this world. Nothing will ever alter that." The boy's shoulders eased a bit. "Is that a guarantee?"
I assure you.
Edward's voice resonated with unwavering certainty. "I have something significant to share with you and Miles." Later that afternoon, the whole family gathered in the judge's chambers, a private and dignified setting for a significant occasion. With Catherine's unwavering support, Edward officially acknowledged Mason and Miles as his sons. The judge bestowed upon the boys new birth certificates, formally altering their names to Mason Parker Blackwood and Miles Parker Blackwood. Catherine explained softly that we chose to keep Parker as your middle name, as it is an integral part of your identity as well. Upon exiting the courthouse, a throng of reporters and photographers gathered on the steps. Edward gently rested a hand on each boy's shoulder, while Catherine strolled alongside them. The lenses recorded not a controversy, but a family, perhaps unconventional, yet undeniably authentic, emerging into the light together. As he sat in the car on the way home, Miles gazed at his new birth certificate, filled with a sense of awe. "Does this imply that we are truly part of the Blackwoods now?" he inquired. "You've always belonged to the Blackwoods," Edward replied. "The documents merely confirm what has always been the case." Catherine observed her son's expressions, recognizing in them the sense of safety and connection she had tirelessly strived to provide throughout their lives. For years, she had shouldered the weight by herself, convinced that Edward had turned them away. In that moment, observing the tender manner in which he led the boys and the unwavering patience he displayed while addressing their countless inquiries. She finally permitted herself to believe that this remarkable shift in their lives was not fleeting, but rather the dawn of something enduring. A year had gone by since the courthouse steps, a year marked by adaptation, recovery, and personal development. The Blackwood mansion had shed its former guise as a quiet tomb. Pictures of family filled the corridors, kids' creations decorated the fridge, and the joyful sounds of laughter frequently resonated through spaces that had been silent for far too long. Catherine resided in the guest cottage on the estate, near enough to engage in her son's everyday activities, yet with sufficient space to preserve her autonomy. She had discovered her own way ahead, leading the Blackwood Family Connection Foundation, a venture initiated by Edward to assist families torn apart by deceit or circumstance. On a brisk autumn evening, Edward meticulously adjusted Miles's tie as they readied themselves for the boys' school talent show. Feeling anxious, Edward inquired, observing the restless movements of his son's hands. Miles gave a slight nod. A small amount? What if I lose the lines of my verse? Then you will discover new ones, Edward assured him. That's what creators do. In the auditorium, Edward and Catherine sat side by side, not as a couple but as allies bound by their mutual affection for their sons. Their bond had transformed into an unexpected connection, marked by profound respect and a true friendship, all stemming from their shared dedication to providing Mason and Miles with the stable family life they needed. Mason took the stage first, his fingers gliding with assurance over the piano keys, as he delivered the classical piece that he and Edward had meticulously rehearsed for weeks. The musical talent he had inherited from his father flourished under careful guidance, and the pride radiating from Edward's face as he observed was undeniable. As Miles stepped onto the stage, his initial apprehension dissipated, and he began to deliver the poem he had crafted. Courage is not about being free from fear. It's about confronting what frightens you the most, such as knocking on a door when you're in need or allowing yourself to be vulnerable after a period of emotional closure. Bravery lies in creating a family from shattered fragments and discovering a sense of belonging in the most surprising corners. Catherine grasped Edward's hand, her eyes brimming with tears. A year had brought about countless transformations. The twins were free from the burdens of adult concerns, no longer facing nights of hunger or chill. They were just boys at that moment, liberated to embrace their childhood, comforted by the profound love that surrounded them. Following the performance, as they welcomed friends and neighbors who had previously murmured about the scandal, but now accepted the family wholeheartedly, Mason pulled on Edward's sleeve. "Father, might we venture to a remarkable place tomorrow?" "Certainly," Edward responded. "Where do you wish to travel?" Miles elaborated. "To the cemetery. We wish to present flowers for Claire." Edward's breath hitched. "Is this for Claire? What is the reason behind this?" Mason's eyes, reminiscent of Edward's, conveyed a depth of understanding that belied his age. "For without her guidance and love, you may have never discovered us." As Edward strolled through the mansion that night, having just tucked the boys into bed, he caught sight of Claire's photograph resting on his desk. "They would have adored you," he murmured. "You would have adored them." The vacant voids in Edward Blackwood's existence, gaps that riches and triumph could never satisfy, had at last discovered their meaning. In an unforeseen manner, marked by suffering, distance, and ultimate recovery, he discovered the family he had always yearned for.